Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. I'm Chevelle Parker from SAS Technical Support, better known as Dude Imperfect. All right. Today, we're going to talk about practical tips for integrating Python, SAS, and R under one roof. How about that? Did I hear somebody say yay? All right. Well, the requirement for this session, ladies and gentlemen, is you have to give me some energy. Is that okay? Is that okay? Yes. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are family. Python, R, and SAS under one roof. Sibling rivalries, that's one thing that we always have with a family, right? Right? Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is my big sister, Lucy. Lucy is my best friend, my protector, and my boss. Right? So, growing up, it was 5 boys and 1 girl. So my mother bought her a lot of dolls and things like that. Kind of girly things, So there was no rivalry between us. But I did notice dolls usually end up like this. Shaved and things like that. So she really wasn't into dolls. By age 9, she was the best football player in the north side of Richmond. She seemed like she was about 7 foot tall. I was a little shorter in those days. But the one thing which caused the sibling rivalry was that they would always pick her first. I was last, even though I thought I was good, I would usually get the ball and close my eyes and just run. But she was very aggressive, and she made all the little boys cry, so they would pick her first. So that's where the sibling rivalry became pretty alive there. But the one thing she would always do, she would say, Chevelle, he's family. If you pick me, you also have to pick him. And that was fair, right? So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the same thing with our sibling rivalry, Python, R, and SAS. Python is known throughout every industry, package integration, with machine learning, AI, and very powerful tool. And R is known for its package ecosystem as well as its graphics capabilities. And SAS is known for data analytics, business intelligence, and ladies and gentlemen, AI and machine learning. How about that, ladies and gentlemen? We are all now family, ladies and gentlemen. How about that? How about that? All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to discuss integrating Python, R, and SAS with VIA 4. We're going to also talk about analyzing data in the cloud using Python and R. And we're going to just introduce VIA Workbench very quickly. So first of all, there are various integration points to VIA and SAS 9. There's the SWAT package, which allows you to connect to the CAD server using Python and R, and other languages, Java, and some other languages as well. There's SASPi that allows you to connect to compute server in VIA or SAS 9. There's Proc Gateway, which we will talk about, and various other integration features. And we're going to cover all of these, ladies and gentlemen, in the next 30 minutes. You think we can do that? All right. Also with R, there are various integration packages, various integration points. We're going to talk about R SWAT, Proc R, which is, anybody heard about the new R? Anybody use R? Oh, great. Anybody heard about the new R procedure? Well, pretend like you haven't, ladies and gentlemen. You've heard it the first time here in this session. How about that? Proc IML Gateway and so forth. And then we have our SAS, we have our the cloud analytics services, and the compute service. So we're going to talk about how they integrate. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have Python, we have R, ladies and gentlemen, so we now live under one roof. How about that? Now, I thought that was really clever. Come on, ladies and gentlemen. That was really clever, wasn't it? And not only do we live under one roof, we have a picket fence. And ladies and gentlemen, voila! Your data lives there. Welcome to the team. You guys are not easily amused. All right. Well, your data lives there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the team. We're going to talk about integrating Python and R via 4 applications. We're going to talk about using the SAS language for your Python and R integration. We're going to talk about managing your Python and R environments. And finally, we're going to give you some quick troubleshooting tips. Let's first talk about SAS Studio. With SAS Studio, we now have the Python editor. Anybody use a Python editor in SAS Studio? Fantastic. So under the covers, we use Python, but we can now write Python code. We can execute. We can schedule right here from SAS Studio. And not only can we do that, we can interchange data have a consistent workflow between Python and SAS. So this is very beneficial. Also, with SAS Studio Flows, with the program step, we can now add Python. So we now can leverage both Python and SAS from our program steps. Model Studio with the open source code node, we can now add Python and R into our machine learning pipelines. And ladies and gentlemen, as of last week, we now have R Studio in SAS Studio, ladies and gentlemen. This was via Cadence 2026. Well, it was actually last week, just put it that way. So now we have the ability to add the right R code directly from SAS Studio. Is that exciting, ladies and gentlemen? Is that exciting, ladies and gentlemen? All right. Ricardo, how are you? I know I'm standing in the way between me and lunch, ladies and gentlemen, but we're going to talk about, next up, we're going to talk about the SAS languages used for Python and R integration. We're going to talk about Proc Python. Anybody use Proc Python? Nobody use Proc Python? Okay, we're going to talk about it. Okay, Proc FCMP using Python objects. This allows you to write Python code directly from SAS 9 or SAS or VIA. Proc Gateway, we're going to mention that somewhat. And then with R integration, we're going to talk about Proc R, Proc IML, and Proc Gateway. First thing we're going to talk about are the language fundamentals. We're going to talk about callback methods in integration. And finally, we're going to talk about integration examples that bridge the divide between SAS, R, and SAS. Python procedure fundamentals. The Proc Python procedure is supported with VIA 4, and this will also be backported to SAS 9 as well. So at M9, we will also add Proc Python. It runs directly within the SAS programs. You can actually run code within the program, or you can run external Python code. It leverages, it launches a sub-process from the compute server, and it allows you to leverage open source libraries such as Pandas and NumPy and some of the others, along with our SAS analytics. And you actually have a consistent workflow between SAS and Python. Let's just go through a few examples here. In this example, I have a list, a Python list, within my submit and in submit statements. So here, I can actually add my Python statements. And here, what I want to do is just remove duplicates in my list. And then I'm going to print it. So within Proc Python, I have my submit statement. And if I execute that statement, as you can see, we have our Proc Python we have our Proc Python statement, as you can see in our log, and you can see we removed all the duplicates from our list. So very easily, we can add Python code and run that directly from SAS Studio. And as you will see eventually, we do have the ability to communicate with SAS while we're in this Python block. We also can run external code, Python code. In this example, I have sample 2 that lives externally, and using the infile statement, I can execute this code and have the same result. So now we run it within the code as well as we have external file location. Anyone heard of SAS content? Anyone use SAS content? It's a centralized, virtualized environment that allows us to store code or user-generated object data or application data very easily. So to access that, it's a virtualized environment. We can use the files srcv vc access method, point to the location with the name of the file, and we can execute the code as well. So this is a virtualized environment which has very easy access. And as you can see, same result. Now, it took me a little while to design that slide. How'd you like that, ladies and gentlemen? All right. Also, we can use interactive method. It's more like if you're using the command line, you can actually list one line, it executes one line at a time. So good for if you're trying to debug code. For example, here I have a couple of problems here, indentation as well as string. As you can see, we're using one line at a time, so it's very easily identified. Callback methods. Using callback methods, what we can do is we can transfer Python data frames to SAS data sets and vice versa. We can also create and extract and retrieve microvariables from a Python session. We can also invoke SAS functions as well as proc FCMP functions, functions created with proc FCMP. As well as we can execute code from the Python session, and we can ability to view logs during the SAS execution. Let's just take a quick look at some of the callback methods. So we have the data frame to SAS data set, so we can move data frames to data sets, vice versa. Then we have callback functions such as simput, simpget to create macrovariables, retrieve macrovariables, submit SAS code from Python, invoke functions, and either hide or display the SAS log. Now, ladies and gentlemen, what I want to show is how we are family, how we help each other, how we bridge the divide. And this is the power of the procedures of Proc Python. So in this example, using Proc Python, I'm going to import the pandas package. The first thing I'm going to do is, well, first of all, let me tell you a little information around this example. But I do have to sway the secrecy. Can everybody keep a secret? Okay. This was a requirement asked for us by one of the large politicians. What they want to know is if they wanted to survey data to determine whether or not they should have a proving ground of rideshare vehicles in various cities. So they wanted to know before they put this out here whether or not this is popular amongst age groups. So what we did was we read some sample data. We created a data object from read_CSV. Using the callback methods, we transferred the data frame to SAS, a SAS data set. We created a macrovariable from within this Python block. And then we submitted proc_freq code. Since proc_freq takes very little syntax and generates very nice reports, we actually decided to do this from Python. And then we're actually going to finish analyzing the data. We're going to send this back, transfer this back to Python using the SAS data sets to data frame callback methods. And ladies and gentlemen, voila, ladies and gentlemen, as we can see, we generated a nice report from Python using SAS. How about that, ladies and gentlemen, using proc_freq? How about that, ladies and gentlemen? And a little bit that goes around this, as I mentioned, I swore you to secrecy. The politician who asked for this data, what his co-workers told me, they said, the boss said, "Thank you bigly." You know what that means? Thank you bigly. Could that be? Could that be the president, ladies and gentlemen? I don't know. But it sounded like it. We can also do things like, it says, we can read long strings within the cloud, within the CAD server. However, the compute server in SAS9, there's a limit of 32,765 characters. So let's say we want to read, suppose in this example, we have a limit of 32,765 rather than 15. What we could do is, this is just sample data. We're going to wrap this little piece of code here. We're going to wrap the data based on this limit. And once we wrap, we're going to create new variables. So once we do that, we're going to transfer that data set from this data frame from Python to SAS and then print it. So, ladies and gentlemen, no longer is there a limit. All we have to do is read this from Python directly in SAS. And we don't mind, ladies and gentlemen, because we're family. How about that? We're a family. And ladies and gentlemen, when we do that, ladies and gentlemen, we've done it. You guys are not really impressed, are you? Matthew, what do you think about that, Matthew? All right. Matthew thinks it's fantastic. If he thinks it's fantastic, ladies and gentlemen. Also, extensive JSON libraries in Python. JSON lines. This is something in SAS, we would have to, this is really using, these are complete JSON files. Each one is a separate object. So if we were to try to read this with SAS, we would get an error. What we need to do in SAS is use a data step or something to put this in arrays, and we have each line as a separate object. However, if we want to communicate with SAS, now, ladies and gentlemen, because we are family, what we could do is we could use the read_JSON method, function, and we could then use the data frame to SAS from the data frame object to the SAS data set. We could then submit within SAS from Python a proc print to read that JSON data. How about that, ladies and gentlemen? And I don't mind doing that because, ladies and gentlemen, we're family. We are family, ladies and gentlemen. We can also read Parquet files very easily. We can do this in VIA very easily, but if you're in SAS9, not so easily done. But ladies and gentlemen, what we can do is, because Python has an extensive library to read files, we can use the read_Parquet function under the pandas package. We could read this external file, and this is Titanic data, ladies and gentlemen. So we're going to transfer this data from Python to a SAS data set, and then we're going to print the first 5 observations, ladies and gentlemen, just like that. Can you see that now? Okay. So this is Titanic data, ladies and gentlemen. We can now see that survivors of the Titanic, so this is, I don't want to bring you down, so I'm not going to spend too much time on that. But you can see, I just hope they didn't pay this much, for that ride. But this is kind of solemn, so I'm going to move on. How about that, ladies and gentlemen? All right. Ladies and gentlemen, how many use Excel? Does everybody use Excel? Does anybody not use Excel? Okay, so here I have a template. And I want to call it a tariff, but it's a tax. 15%. So everything that I get in now, I'm going to tax it at 15%. So I have my formula here. And so now, what I'm going to do is use ODS Excel. In ODS Excel, I'm going to create some source data. And from the source data, I'm going to use ProcPython to copy that source data to my template. And ladies and gentlemen, when I copy it, oh yeah, that's my result. So now you can see I now have my formula. So I used source data to copy that to my template. And ladies and gentlemen, now I have my formulas. How about that? I used the template. How about that? That was one of the better examples, ladies and gentlemen. All right. We also have, in this example, it just shows what we did here. We loaded the workbooks, created a copy of it, iterate through, and then we save the file. Very easily, ladies and gentlemen. Using R language, using R fundamentals. We released this with Cadence 2603. Exchange data easily between SAS and R. We can export data sets using the R data frames via the Haven package. And just like we did with ProcPython, we can execute code directly from the R block. And as I mentioned, we can also integrate R, the program editor, in SAS Studio. Now, not to belabor this, we also have some new callback functions. We have rplot that will allow you to print graphs to the results window, render image, and then we can actually show objects in the results window. And then we have our usual functions that we have with ProcPython. Examples here. So here we just created a sample data frame, and we used the simput to create a macro variable. We transferred the data frame to a work data set, and then we used the ProcPrint or ProcReport to display the output in the results window. Just like that, ladies and gentlemen, we use callback methods with R, the new R procedure, ladies and gentlemen. We can also display R objects in the results window. So here, we loaded the temporary data set iris, and we use the show command with the R object that was created with the summary function. And using the show, we can actually display the R object directly in the results window. We can also add plots. Using the rplot option, callback method, we can display plots generated from R. In this example, it's a scatter plot in the results window. The gateway procedure, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but this is a procedure that's used for high efficiency. We can transfer, if you have very large data sets, we can move those with the gateway procedure. It launches multiple Python and R sessions inside the cache workers for efficient removal of the data sets, of the cache tables. And it requires an active cache library. In this example, we use we load the R package, and we're going to write the data frame to the cache library, and we're just going to read it back. So very easily, if you have very large tables, we can use the gateway procedure. Managing your environments in VIA 4. VIA 4, we're going to talk about selecting an IDE, managing your Python and R install packages, and determining the version of your packages. Using the IDE, you can actually use, beginning in Enterprise Guide 8.4, you can use Enterprise Guide. You can use SAS Studio, which is the default IDE for VIA. Anybody use Visual Studio? Oh, awesome. If you like external browsers, you can use Visual Studio. You can use Jupyter Notebook for R and Python. Just a quick look at SAS extension for VS Code. You can use code. You have code completion here. You have SAS content. You use SAS content. You can use Get for source control. Then you have you can manage exactly which can, the instance of whether it's SAS 9 or VIA that you want to use. You can also use Copilot. For instance, if I want to get some sample code based on user input, I can use a comment and generate some sample code if I want to train and test some data sets. Managing packages in your source library. We can manage Python and R. We can update IT administrators here. Okay. We can update Python packages and R packages. We can view packages. We can deploy Python and R using the SAS configurator for open source. This is a tool that allows us to easily download, install, and configure Python and R. We can make updates to the installation using configuration maps, such as the change.configuration files. And we can install when there's no internet access. The SAS configurator for open source requires internet access. If you don't have it, we can manually install it. So this is a change.configuration file. These are the packages that we install by default, as you can see. Then we have our Tarball, a download for Python, which we use 3.12. Then for R, these are the packages we install by default, and the R Tarball. So for instance, if we want to install Python and R, if we want to list, let's say we want to install a package without IT support, we can install it locally using the sys subprocess. Then we could specify the package we want to install, and this would install it in our user location rather than the default installation address. So it would tell us, and then it would actually install it. There's another method you can use as well, using custom steps. We can also display packages using the same method. We can also do that for R. 3 minutes, okay. We can also install R, the packages installed. And there are various errors that we can get that we can troubleshoot, and these are some of them. If you go to there's going to be a paper added to the downloads as well in the resources section, so be on the lookout for that. I explain a little bit more what some of these errors are. And time is running out, so I'm going to kind of go quickly through this. This is using the SWAT package to connect to the CAS server using Python. We use the CAS upload frame to upload a data frame to the CAS table, and then we display it. And then there's the introduction to the SAS Workbench. Please stop by if you want to see me, and we can talk more about this. It does some very neat things, like you can work in your preferred coding environment, seamless integration, you can install packages without IT support. And ladies and gentlemen, as I mentioned, you can use the editor of your choice. You can also, it's very scalable. You can specify how much memory you need. You can add your packages or list your packages. And ladies and gentlemen, with that, as I mentioned, did I tell you about my sister? I tell you about my sister Lucy, right? We are family, ladies and gentlemen. She is now a college professor. She still bosses me around, but ladies and gentlemen, she still hangs out in Richmond, Virginia. And she plays basketball, ladies and gentlemen. You know what? She still wins. She still wins, ladies and gentlemen. And ladies and gentlemen, Python, R, and SAS, they still win, ladies and gentlemen. Python with its enormous packages. R with its data analytics, ladies and gentlemen. SAS with this ecosystem, ladies and gentlemen, and its governance, ladies and gentlemen, we win. Ladies and gentlemen, under the Texas sky, ladies and gentlemen, under the Texas sky, ladies and gentlemen, under one roof, ladies and gentlemen, we did it. All right, Chevelle Parker, SAS.com. Email me anytime, ladies and gentlemen. These are the resources, and ladies and gentlemen, we've done it. All right, thank you. Who feel, catch me in the hallway for questions.